Welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, Dr. Erianne Weight. Dr. Weight is a professor for sport administration at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She also is a chair for the UNC Faculty Athletics Committee, and she is a director for the Center for Research in Intercollegiate Athletics. She also serves as a research consultant now for over 11 years. It is my absolute honor to welcome Dr. Weight.
Courtney, it's wonderful to be here, and I love your podcast. It's exactly what the world needs right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. You know, as I was doing research for this conversation, your background and your drive for life totally motivates me and inspires me. So I can't wait to share it just with the whole Plenty of Positivity community.
It's been a journey. It's funny. I think once I got full professor, I felt like I had gotten to the top of the mountain, and I took a breath really for the first time, and I looked back, and so I definitely have a lot of lessons, things I would have done a little bit differently. And now, thinking about what my next mountain is and what the influence I want to continue to make should be.
No, absolutely. And I cannot wait to dive into all of your career experiences, of course, but I would love to just start off with a brief introduction and a background of yourself, Dr. Weight.
Okay, well, I gave a presentation in DC a few months ago that was on allies and advocacy, and I started off by saying I am a white girl, a white Mormon from Utah. That is how I grew up, and in showing pictures, it was a very sheltered. A lot of people call Provo, Utah, Happy Valley because it's very Mormon. It's very similar in terms of how people see the world, and certainly that was how I was shaped growing up. I lived on Osmond Lane next to the Osmonds, and it sounded and was very beautiful. Through a turn of events, my family kind of had a fall from grace off of our Osmond Lane house, and we then moved into a small condominium in the center of Provo. And so I learned very early on that every person has, in my mind, equal value. And I always, from really that moment on, felt this independence to work hard and kind of make my path what it should be, without having money as my driver. Just trying to do things that I felt were right and following my heart, because I had seen all levels of income and types of living. So anyway, fast forward many years, ran track at the University of Utah, pursued a Ph.D. at Indiana University, and kind of found my passion when I got to UNC, but I think we'll talk about that later.
No, that was a wonderful introduction. And, something that really stands out that I would love for you to speak about was, on your website, you speak about how your mom would always tell you, quote, enjoy the journey. And I'm curious how that resonated with you as a young girl. But then also now, as you reflect back, what meaning does it have? Maybe a different meaning to you now?
So yeah, when she said it to me all those years, I don't think that I really understood, and I finally am. And it's ironically, it's exactly what I say to my daughters, right? Because I think that many of us, are so accomplishment focused, and that we think I will be happy as soon as this happens, or, I'm just focusing on this next goal. And when I hit that goal, everything's going to be better in some way. But it really, I think, hit me when one of my goals in college was to qualify for nationals, and make a specific score in the heptathlon. And all of my focus had been on that for so many years. And then I remember waking up the next day and thinking, I don't feel any different. I reached this goal. I did the thing that I've always wanted to do, and I still feel not empty, but just not fulfilled. And so, and then immediately I set the next goal and then the next goal. And, it's just that never ending cycle of striving rather than just taking a deep breath, enjoying the moment, and realizing that the journey is the destination, to, as my mother said, enjoy the journey, because the destination, you'll get there, you'll get everywhere. And when you get there, enjoy that journey. So it's a never ending process, but so wise. And I've shared that with my students so many times, because I think as undergrads, you focus on whatever your next test or your next whatever, and you just need to slow down, find your heart, find your inner peace, and look around at the things that are beautiful along the journey.
I think that's wonderful. And it reminds me of, I could remember distinctively in high school in this strong urge and desire to go to college, the freedom that college would bring. And to your point, it's almost as if you're so interested in that senior year. Like you can't wait to be a senior, and it goes so quickly, let alone college just flies. You're 4 years there. I mean, at least for me, mine was 4.5, but it really does. You're always busy. You're meeting new people. And if only you could look back, and to your point, those times when you felt maybe you were like stressed beyond belief. I look back and it was like, okay, it was studying for an exam, in 2 weeks or something that I was actually stressed about. But in the midst of things and the big picture, it was like, during those 2 weeks, like, enjoy yourself, enjoy your friends, enjoy, gymnastics and stuff. And you're right. Like you lose sight of consistently aiming for that destination, and you will get there, but truly embracing that journey and how you're growing professionally, how you're growing even personally too. So I love that you say that. And, speaking of when I was bringing up high school, you graduated high school at the age of 16 years old. I literally had to read that twice. And to me, that is unbelievable. I wasn't even ready for life yet. And here you are on the fast track of life, Dr. Weight. I want to hear all about it. What maybe motivated you to finish high school so quickly and to move forward at the age of 16?
Well, it was just always being in a race, and that's probably why my mom told me what she told me so many times. So I started first grade at 5. So I was already a year behind. I never went to kindergarten. And that's because when I was young, my mother would play school with me all day, every day. I was the youngest child, and I think we just hung out together, and she made everything an educational game, which was absolutely beautiful. So I think part of it was I was the youngest, and, to catch me up with my sisters, I started a little bit young. But then I wanted to play high school basketball. And when I was in 7th grade, I came up with this scheme to skip 8th grade. I kind of wanted new friends. I wanted a new adventure, and I mostly wanted to play high school basketball. So I put together a presentation, went to the principal by myself without telling my parents, and said, I'm bored in all of my classes. I feel like I need a new challenge, and I would like to skip 7th grade or skip 8th grade and start high school next year. And And the principal said, I'm okay with it if your parents are. So I went to my parents and kind of gave them the same presentation. And my mother said, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And my dad was a little bit hesitant because he said, you're going to be behind physically if and sport is important to you. Uh, and he was very right, but I thought I was ready. So skipped eighth grade and started ninth grade, and then ended up not making the basketball team, probably because I was 12.
Wow.
Anyway, it motivated me, worked extra hard, and ended up making it my sophomore year. But yes, it was a little bit of stubbornness and a little bit of always kind of just being in a hurry to grow up. Excited. I dreamed of business suits um, and school supplies were the things that I couldn't wait for when I grew up. So I think that was the part of the reason that I pushed it so much, but did my full 4 years of college, and then went to high school or at college at 16. And I remember when we'd have to do the NCAA compliance forms, I would always have to take them to my parents for 3 years, where everybody else could sign for themselves. So yeah, I was always very young.
That's incredible. And, as you would move forward, this drive and determination and desire truly for growth in life continued on into your collegiate years. So you received a bachelor's of science in exercise and sport science from the University of Utah, and you received your MBA with an emphasis on entrepreneurship from the University of Utah, graduating both by the age of 21. If you could please just walk the audience through what it was like getting 2 degrees. I mean, if I remember correctly, I was 22 years old when I graduated just from my bachelor with my bachelor's degree. So before we jump into all the athletics that you were involved in too, what was your collegiate journey like, if you could sum it up?
Well, like many people in college, I don't know that I knew what I wanted to do next.
Yeah.
And so I think I started with it was the classes that I loved that I would want to learn more about. So I think initially I was a psychology major, which I still am so passionate about. Switched it a couple times, but ultimately, when I thought about what I wanted to learn,
Yeah.
I ended up running track, and I wanted to be the best athlete I could be. And to be that, I wanted to learn all about my body, how my muscles were growing, what about the nutrition, exercise physiology. So I ended up choosing my major really uh, to help me pursue my athletic goals,
Sure.
and had an amazing experience. I've shared a bunch that at the University of Utah, my favorite class was one that combined this brilliant professor in sports psychology, and they had a class specifically for athletes
Wow.
where we could practice sports psychology principles and learn the science and directly apply it to ourselves on the court, on the field. So I have many memories from that class of all of us just sharing our experiences, meditating on the floor together and doing visualization exercises. But that class and that journey has really inspired me to facilitate educational opportunities where you can pair your passion, whatever it might be, and a lot of people's passions are outside traditional disciplines, with the science that can support you becoming the best version of yourself. So yes, I did my undergraduate in exercise and sports science. And then, like I said earlier, I wanted to wear business suits. And so I always kind of knew that an MBA was in my path. I will say, though, a lot of that was a little bit rushed. I don't know that I soaked in as much as I could have in the experiences. And it was somewhat about checking the boxes, and I see that now in so many of my students. And we talk about the downfalls of perfectionism and how if you're seeking to do the best you can, it often holds you back from opportunities to grow. And I remember one class I took, it was bioethics. Well, several things. I got a B plus for the first time my freshman year in college. I had a 4.0 going into it, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it took away the pressure of being perfect, having that perfect GPA for so many years. And but it also crushed my confidence in writing. It was it was a history class where I got a bad grade on a paper, which brought my grade down. And because of that, I dropped this bioethics class because it was all based on essays, and I just felt like, well, I'm a bad writer, so I don't want to put myself in academic jeopardy by taking this class, even though I remember the first couple sessions were so fascinating. So I look back on that, and now that I understand the science of perfectionism, I definitely fell into that trap by avoiding something that I really wanted to do for fear of my limitations.
I think
So
that's so interesting. Like when you speak about even just the motivation to go into exercise science and what motivated you, obviously your athletic journey. I could remember as I look back now, I mean, how young are you? 17, 18 years old. At least for me, see, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but when you look back, you really are so young to even understand sometimes what is truly out there. I ended up in advertising, and it's a funny story because talk about not having my life together. Like it was my counselor, academic counselor. Her name was Judy. She was amazing. And she was so humorous. Every time I would go in there, it was this idea of, okay, Courtney, what is it this week? What major do you want to be in this week? And it finally got to the point where it was like, okay, you actually have to choose something unless you want to be on an 8-year plan. And so ended up in advertising. But I love to hear people's story as to what maybe influences them to take that, or to get into that, first major for a bachelor's degree. And then, as you mentioned, you go from basically sciences over to business. And I think that's so interesting too. Like you said, you just wanted to wear like a business suit. So was that your primary reason for it?
my sister asked me if I was into medicine. I was like, no, I want to dress up.
I love
So
it.
yeah, it was just this vision of making important decisions, negotiating, and but really, it was office supplies in the business suit.
I admire that. I think that's amazing. But it led you, I mean, obviously, just like everything else in life, it leads you to where you are today. And before we move forward, I want to hear more about your athletic journey. So you this is on your website, but I think it's so wonderfully like eloquent, the words that you use, but you literally hurdled and heptathloned your way through your bachelor's and master's degree. So, could you please provide us just an understanding of that athletic journey and that balance that you had also with your academics?
Well, I think it goes back to my high school experience. And that passion I had for basketball. I really thought I was going to follow in the footsteps of my dad and my sister and play college basketball, and that was what motivated me. But I had a really rough experience with a coach my senior year that I ended up stepping back from the team, but I had a lot of anger and unresolved feelings that drove me, I think, to run faster and faster. And I lifted weights, and I channeled a lot of my angst into the outdoor track season my senior year. That basketball coach was also an outdoor track coach, and he was there every day, and I could just feel this bubbling anger drive me. And then I also had a phenomenal track coach that was the women's coach, and he just believed in me, and he led me to better form and better opportunities. And so I ran faster and faster and faster that senior year and ended up getting a track scholarship to the University of Utah. And I picked my school 100% based on my coach because I had had such a rough experience. I wanted somebody that I could trust and who loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that immediately with Coach Mike Jones at the University of Utah. But I was a very skinny 16-year-old that he recruited with just that truly got the times I got out of sheer determination because I have pictures and I had very few muscles that freshman year. In my first race, I was in the lane next to Tiffany Lott Hogan, who had just gotten the world record in the 55-meter hurdles. And I wish I had a picture of that race because she's just this buff, strong woman. And I was just this little 16-year-old. And it felt like she finished the race as I started it. And I think quickly my coach felt like I might be better as a heptathlete. And the story that led me to that is he put me as an anchor leg in the 4x4 at our indoor conference meet. And I think I've always had a little bit of imposter syndrome. And even then in track, I felt like I can't let my team down. I'm not going to let anybody pass me in this race. And so I did it. I ran 2 seconds faster than I ever had. And I actually passed 2 people on the straightaway, finishing the race. However, about 2 feet in front of the finish line, I collapsed. So my time would have been much faster than I had, but I collapsed because I think I ran faster than my body was able to. And I was scooped off the track by the conference official and my coach on the bus ride home. He just said, like, I haven't seen an athlete with that much heart in a long time. He said, I'm going to have you be a heptathlete, because I think the mentality of heptathletes are just, you keep driving and you don't have to be amazing at any one of the events, but good at all of them. So that's what led me to the heptathlon. But incidentally, the conference official that scooped me up that day on the track ended up being the person that led me to my Ph.D. at Indiana many, many years later. So that moment was a very pivotal one for me. Because of that experience, we would touch base at every conference meet. And when I was finishing my M.B.A., he said, we have a new Ph.D. program in sport marketing and management that kind of pairs your undergrad in exercise and sport science with your master's in business. And would you be interested in doing it? And I was finishing my MBA. All of my classmates were interviewing for jobs. I was a graduate assistant at the University of Utah at that time, and I wanted to continue training. He said I could train with his Olympic heptathlete for the Olympic trials, and that was really exciting for me. And the other reason I chose the PhD was, up until that point, and I mentioned this a little bit, I was very shy, a little bit unsure of my abilities, and this vision of myself being in a boardroom, speaking up, and being powerful. I didn't feel like I was there yet, primarily because I wasn't confident in my public speaking skills. All of the presentations that I had done in college, I would work so hard, memorize everything. And so I didn't have the think on your feet skill yet because I hadn't really flexed that muscle. And he said part of my financial package would be to teach undergraduate classes. And I couldn't even fathom doing that. You know, going from memorizing even the shortest speech to teaching an undergrad class felt like the most challenging, scariest thing. But I knew if I wanted to become that version of myself that I dreamed of, had to put myself in that extremely uncomfortable position to teach these undergrad classes and learn how to be a better public speaker. And because of that, I chose Indiana to continue training and pursue my PhD. And then I just really fell in love with research and the idea of making an impact on this industry that I love so much, college sport, through policy research and consulting.
Wow, that is quite the journey. And I want to take a step back to just speaking about track and field in general. I know you obviously mentioned like the 4x4, 4x400. And
Mhm.
the one thing that really stands out to me was in high school, I had briefly stopped the sport of gymnastics, and my father saw automatically, like when I was just sitting at home doing nothing after school, he's like, no, we got to get you in another sport. And so at that point, I went to track and field. And, coming out of gymnastics, I'm like, whatever, probably 90 pounds. I'm like 13 years old.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget it. I was more for like sprinting and 100-meter dash, 4x1, too, as well. That was so much fun. I love that race.
Mhm.
But I'll never forget my coach. He was like, Courtney, he goes, I want to see your time for the 400. And so I'm like thinking like, okay, how hard could this be? It's one lap, let me just sprint it out. Well, it was, I mean, I've had many humbling moments in sport. This was one of the most embarrassing moments I think I've ever had. And like when you talk about stopping short like, would you say 2 feet right before the finish line?
Yeah.
I went in this heat from first to seventh, like in no time. And I literally, that last straightaway, I could not walk. The lactic acid, I had never been introduced to so much lactic acid in my life. And I'm literally just to finish, because I was determined to finish, I
Mhm.
was walking in so much pain. And I looked at him after and I was like, please do not put me in that event ever again. And here I stand, I'm like basically, I'm 5'1". I say I'm 5'2", maybe on a good day. But just the build, and that's another thing you do. You see in track is just different body builds and stuff for different events. But when you were talking about like the your experience in track, I go back to that all the time because it was such a humbling moment for sure. But your journey is it's so inspiring as you would move forward. And I just want to reiterate that because as you would go into your PhD program, obviously there was other factors and influences, but that thought process of the fear of public speaking, could you maybe elaborate on how you really overcame that during your PhD? Because I do think a lot of people could relate to that. I know when I was reading about this, obviously before our conversation, I was thinking, wow, like that was totally me. I was so nervous to get in front of a room and speak. And like I said, I mean, even doing podcasts and stuff, it's a work in progress. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I finally know the science now behind becoming an expert. And I wish I would have known that earlier. I think we do it naturally in sport, and we know, if if you want to get stronger, you have to do specific things. You break down your muscle and then it rebuilds, and you break it down and it rebuilds. And it's the exact same thing in any skill. So, um, Anders Ericsson came up with deliberate practice, which is this beautiful visualization of how people can become experts. And it essentially is a cycle of setting a goal, performing, and then evaluating it, setting a goal, performing, and evaluating over and over and over and over. And you can do that, but ultimately you get the best growth curve if you get feedback along the way. So um, those first couple of classes were brutal. And I was very honest with the students. I'm a first time teacher. I This is really hard for me. I am going to do my best, but I need your help. I need feedback. So things that I'm doing that are strange or off-putting, like please tell me because I want to do the best I can. And I think that level of pure vulnerability, because I kind of had to be in front of them 3 days a week, paired with just a real desire to become better at this skill. And then years and years of practice have helped me little by little become better and more confident in this skill of public speaking. And I think it's been really wonderful to me to see that, because everything is just like a muscle. Everything is something that you can practice and get better. Ideally, you can have a mentor that kind of helps shape you. I went, and my niece has a bread company, and she has done years of trial and error to make these perfect, beautiful, delicious loaves of bread. And I just wanted to learn. So I went and I had her help me, and she's, she can knead it and make these beautiful loaves of bread flawlessly and so quickly. But it was really challenging. And everything she told me, she said, this took me about 2 months to perfect, or, this took me a couple years of research to understand how and where to score it. And it was a great example of, she had been on that growth curve and now she's an expert, but having me just start at the novice level, having her right there as a teacher coach along the way would so speed up my growth curve. So in the ideal scenario, we can have somebody helping us, giving us tips and tools, but I used students to do that, to give me feedback and just continue practicing and practicing.
I completely agree. And I think it's so important to be willing to take that feedback in, just like honest feedback when you're starting new things. I could remember the first time that I lectured in a course too. And it was during the program, the PhD program. And it really was like, I knew that that was going to be part of it at one point, but it's like, oh, that'll be down the road. And when it hits you and you're obviously teaching the course, it's like, okay, wow, I really do have to build up that confidence to be, standing up in front of a room of whether it's 20, 40 students, or obviously a big lecture hall. But I think it's that kind of that analogy of just, instead of just dipping your foot into the pool, like seeing how cold it is, like you sometimes really do. You just have to jump in. And like I said, be willing to hear that feedback and to, keep moving forward and improve every time, like whatever that may be. But I totally can relate to teaching for that very first time. I remember those butterflies, so to speak. But go ahead. Mhm.
When I think of what my journey would have been if I hadn't have taken that opportunity,
Yeah.
just, you don't get that many opportunities to do public speaking generally. And so it's all about reps, it's the number of repetitions that you get. And I don't think I could be the professional I wanted to be without being so uncomfortable on a weekly, daily basis for years, teaching. And so if there, I always tell my students, if there's something that is holding you back from being that person you want to be, you have to find that really difficult opportunity that you're going to be able to get those reps in, right on the edge of your comfort zone, right where you're really struggling, in order to build those skills.
No, that's excellent, excellent advice. And speaking of which, just to your point, as far as teaching, you have been a professor for over 13 years for sport management. And I do want to recognize your accomplishments are unbelievable, just truly remarkable. Research fellow for the College Sport Research Institute. You've published 3 books, over 100 refereed articles and book chapters, and consulted for over 30 organizations. So I would love to hear, number one, I mean, just even on like a daily basis, a weekly basis, how are you part of so many different organizations, or even when you talk about like consulting these organizations, how do you literally do that? And how do you keep stretching yourself to keep continually professionally grow?
Well, uh, I've had an amazing support system. I'll say that. My husband and my family have been there for me so much along the way. So it's given me the ability to pursue opportunities that have come as they've come, and to say yes when I think if I didn't have that support system, I wouldn't have been able to. So, uh, how have I done what I've done? I think honestly, it's just one day at a time, just doing projects that you're passionate about, connecting with people that can facilitate opportunities, and when you get those opportunities, give it your all so that they'll ask you again to help. Um, I One of my favorite quotes, and it's kind of come up, I think, through our whole discussion, is from Steve Jobs. He gave it in a commencement speech when he said that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back, and so you have to trust in your gut, in your faith, or whatever it is, to keep going, and just trusting that eventually you'll be able to look back and everything will make sense. And and it's amazing how that ends up happening, but it's following the projects and the topics and the passions that you have, and trusting that even though this might not make sense right now, hopefully when you look back and connect all the dots, it will. And I've certainly taken some very strange um, turns along the way. I changed my whole research path based on the scandal that happened at the University of North Carolina, because I felt like the athletes weren't being treated justly, and so in doing that, I became a novice again in somewhat of a new field of education. And then I feel like I'm doing that again, kind of expanding outside of sport and now into a field of expertise generally. But when I look back, all of these little pieces connect, and that diversity kind of makes you stronger in the end. So I would just say, put one foot in front of the other, and say yes to projects when you feel passionate about them and that they will fill your soul in some way.
No, I love that advice. And, when you speak about just your research line, you have a very broad research line. And I think it's so interesting to mention you began in the context of the intersection of where higher education meets NCAA Division I intercollegiate athletics. And then you would also move into wanting, or this desire to better understand those who are in the pursuit of expertise in music, dance, surgery, theater, and other high pressure performance environments. So, could you maybe just walk us through that journey in your research?
Started. Not all of our moments of ignition can be captured, but mine very much was. I was sitting in a faculty executive committee meeting at UNC, where we were talking about the role of athletics on campus. In It was in 2014. UNC had been through for several years an academic athletic scandal that was comprised of a lot of things, but at the heart of it in the end were these paper classes that they saw that a lot of athletes and Greek life students were taking these classes where they would write a paper and get a grade. And so the integrity of athletics on campus was come into question because, or not athletics so much, but the athlete's academic journey. So a lot of professors were asking what, maybe we should get rid of athletics. It's tarnishing the academic reputation of our university. And I sat in this room thinking back to that experience I had in that sports psychology class, like I mentioned. And I asked one of the full professors, I didn't have tenure at the time, can you tell me the difference between an athlete and a musician that comes to UNC? And the response, very quickly, very snarky, was, yeah, I can have an intelligent conversation with one and I cannot with the other. And at that moment, I realized that this was a lot bigger than just the athletes taking paper classes. There was some serious biases at play that were largely rooted, now that I know the history, in classism and racism relative to how society views athletes. So I responded in that moment. For me, the difference between an athlete and a musician is an athlete comes to UNC in most institutions and they're not able to earn any credit for the pursuit of passion in athletics, whereas a musician can come and at UNC you can earn 96 credits studying music. And so, say a vocal performance major and an athlete have very similar structures. They're both perfecting their skill. The singer is singing. It's a very physical and academic journey. The athlete is doing the same thing. They both have coaches. The difference is one of them is getting academic credit for their pursuit, whereas the other is not. They have the full-time job of being a high-level athlete paired with a full-time job of being a student. So that just disconnect really led me to explore the educational value of participation in college sport and why we haven't recognized sport as education or facilitated opportunities for athletes. And I learned that in the West, at the University of Utah, where I was, and a lot of the West Coast schools, there are more opportunities for athletes to earn credit, whereas in the Southeast,
Mm-hmm.
it's the least prevalent, and that and that follows the lack of integration of athletics into higher education is very similar to the lack of integration we've had in our history.
That's incredible. I think about my time in sport and the experiences that you have, and truthfully, like how they translate to the life lessons that you could take on with you. And then, obviously, as you enter into your professional career, something that really stands out to me, there was a multitude of lessons obviously learned. But this idea to take chances, I learned that in sport at a very young age. But I will have to say the whole teamwork dynamic, especially in gymnastics as you move into the collegiate realm more so, working with a team, as we all know, in your professional career is so important in many, obviously, different career paths. But you learn a lot from sport, especially at the D1 level, that pressure, how to handle pressure, how to step up when you need to step up for that team. So I love how just your area of interest and how it kind of like piqued your interest, obviously, to head in that direction. That's really interesting to me. How people get into those areas is simply by, of course, their experience or coming up with conversations.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and now it's evolved, as you mentioned, from looking at sport to all these other fields. There's this beautiful community of expertise researchers that have studied musicians and chess players and dancers and pilots and surgeons and how we make decisions. It's naturalistic decision making, how we make tough decisions under stressful circumstances, and it's amazing how much overlap there is between the sport preparation, performance under pressure, and in all of these different fields. And so that's kind of how my research has expanded beyond sport is being learning more about this naturalistic decision making and expertise field, and all of the work that's been done there.
That's incredible. And, you know, as we move forward, I love to understand with how many positions that you hold in your professional career, as well as balancing life. You have two beautiful daughters. Obviously, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're a go getter, which I just absolutely love. It's so inspiring to me. But I'm always so curious how people balance each and every like identity almost.
Well, funny, I think I had before I had children, I asked one of my colleagues, how do you do it? I can't even imagine. And she said, the funny thing is, I can't imagine doing it without them, because when I come home, it puts everything into perspective. And I would say the same thing. Yesterday, I had a really rough day at work and cried a fair amount, which is why my eyes are a little bit different than they normally look today. But I came home and just truly like getting a hug from my sweet girl and my husband. It just makes everything better, and it puts everything into perspective. And you know what really matters. And I think in these institutions and in these social systems that we're in, there is so much
Mhm.
frustration, bureaucracy, injustice, and having perspective through communities that love and support you makes all the difference. So I'd say the same thing. My dad would tell me a story about a donkey in the well. Have you heard this story?
I have not. Please
So
enlighten
there's
me.
there's a donkey at the bottom of a well, and he fell into the well and is stuck, and is braying and hoping that somebody will come help him. And finally, his farmer comes and is up there, and the donkey's excited, like, I'm going to be saved. But the farmer just starts shoveling dirt onto the back of the donkey's back, and instead of feeling like he was going to be saved, he's like, wow, okay, the person that I loved and trusted is now burying me alive. I'm getting dirt shoveled on the back of my back when I was already struggling. And in that situation, it's really easy to give up, and it's really easy to drown and be like, okay, well, this is my plight. I'm already at the bottom of a well, and now there's dirt being shoveled on the back of me. But my dad said, and whoever told the story originally, um, what that donkey did is, with each shovel that came down upon him, he'd shrug it off and step up, and just shrug it off and step up. And soon enough, that dirt that felt like it was burying him was actually his path out of the well. So every time it came down, it helped him get higher and higher and higher all the way out. So there are definitely days that it feels like you're getting dirt shoveled on you, but all you got to do is shrug it off and step up, keep going, one foot in front of the other, and pretty soon you'll get out of whatever hole, you'll get stronger, and you'll be farther away from whatever problem was ailing you.
I love that. It's such a wonderful analogy because there are so many times I feel like I reflect upon experiences I have more so now. And I do believe when you are going through tough times, you're right. You're molding yourself going through that point. And I mean, I'll admit it, there's times, just to your point, if I have a bad day, I bask in that sorrow for like a hot second. And I'll be telling, my husband, like, whatever's going on. But then it's true. Like the next day that you wake up, it's like, okay, Court, snap out of it. You got to keep moving forward. And I think it's a great lesson about life because I do feel that life is about always getting back up that next day and understanding, acknowledging the lessons that you can learn, but then the personal growth that is something that took me a while to be honest with myself. Like, okay, why did this happen and what can I learn from it? But it does take a certain level of maturity. I will say that. But I think it's a wonderful analogy too about life, and whether that's in a professional situation or if it's in personal situations, that things happen to mold and to develop you ultimately.
Yeah.
So, as we move forward, you gave some wonderful advice there, but I'm just so curious, would you have any, whether it be career advice, life advice, or even sport related advice for the community?
I might just finish where we started and echo the words of my mother to try to enjoy the journey, to try to live in the moment and to be present and to recognize the beauty and the joy around us, even if it feels really rough, as it often can, to realize that the destination is always going to be there. You're generally going to get there. You won't always know how or how the path will take you, but if you just really try to see um, see bumps in the road as opportunities and try to find peace, enjoyment, and solitude along the way, and especially surround yourself by people that can lift you up and give you feedback when you need it. Yeah, I'll just continue with and enjoy the journey.
That is fantastic advice. And Dr. Waite, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Plenty of Positivity podcast. You are truly an inspiration, not only to myself, but I know so many others. And so I wish you the absolute best in all of your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Courtney. This was wonderful. Thank you.